Hello everyone and welcome to Pure Japanese Grand Touring Series Round 5 highlights. So, Tony started on pole position in his Lexus Denso Sard, followed by Andro. From Andro down it was so close with the times, 2,000 separating him and Loza, and there was 15 drivers on this grid. TPE Dash Russ did not make it onto this grid this time. He'd made large one before, hadn't made it this time, and unfortunately missed out on qualifying for this lounge. It was Tony who would start us off though, followed by Andro, Loza and MSP J-Town, and MSP J-Town was the one to watch initially in this race. After of course being disqualified from round 4, he had it all to do to try and work his way up this championship and this race indeed. So he would initially put a lot of pressure on Loza Is Cool, and it would be who would come out on top on this first lap, Loza Is Cool or MSP J-Town. All the drivers shuffling for position to try and get an early advantage, which Tony indeed had. He pulled enough of a gap to pull away from the second place battle, to break away from the slipstream and really increase his lap time, get away from the battles. Loza Is Cool, MSP J-Town and Andro were all in the fight for second position. As you can see, there were little packed throughout the race and little battles happening all through slipstream. Stretchy tried to make an early pit stop to try and do the cutback and break away from some of the slipstreaming battles, try and gain a bit of time, and strategy would certainly come into play in this race. Andro though unfortunately made a mistake, ran wide and had to come in behind Muriel, and that would affect his race quite a lot as he also had engine damage. So GM Matthew then came into the pits along with Muriel and along with Juju. Strategy once again coming into play because these guys wanted to stay in a pack for the slipstream but also gain an advantage with the cutback. Where would they come out in relation to everybody else? Well, Juju, GM Matthew and Muriel would actually come out ahead of Stretchy at this point. But Stretchy, speeding down the straight, would catch them coming up to the first corner because he's doing 100 miles an hour more than those good drivers. Stretchy though, obviously pitted quite early on. It was then, can he hold out for the rest of the race? Next lap we had Loza Is Cool, MSP J-Town and Spurgy all come into the pit. Skendiggy stayed out, and it was a question now who would come out on top out of these three. They were fighting for second place. Who's going to come out the pits first? Which strategy is going to win? We stayed on Spurgy just to see where he would come out and if he would make any positions, and of course he actually did make a position. On who? We're about to find out. MSP J-Town came out, but Loza Is Cool lost a position in the pit stops, most likely due to just coming to the pits just a little too quick, so got penalised slightly and meant he came out behind Spurgy. This would help out MSP J-Town greatly because he managed to actually pull away from these two as they went into a long race battle. MSP J-Town breaking the slipstream meant he could just have a quiet race in trying to catch Tony, and that would mean he would try and secure second position. Skendiggy then pitted, and was it a good strategic call? Indeed it was, because he would come out right in the battle now for third position because MSP J-Town broke away, and it was a question, did the other drivers make the correct call as well? Nizman initially came out ahead but got caught up by Hoshino, Pazum and the rest of that pack, and initially would start a very close battle. As you can see here, we had Hoshino, Nizman, Pazum, Ghost Driver, Muriel and Matthew all fighting for that 6th position. Coming down, it was Nizman who wanted to make the move. Pitting later, he had more grip on his tyres, so drove around the outside to actually get that place, get 6th position from Hoshino. Once again, the very next lap, it was Matthew having a bit of a mistake, sliding, and that meant that he lost out of that pack and joined a lower pack in the field. Muriel also lost out initially, and Juju was closing in on him fast. The question then was this man going to break away? He did break away, and he was then trying to catch the third place battle involving Loza, Spurgy and Skendiggy. MSP J-Town was still losing time to Tony, so he would remain in second place. But would Nizman catch this third place battle? If he caught it up, it would then be a 4-car battle for that position. Spurgy, Loza and Skendiggy were continually fighting for that position, so constantly losing time, and Skendiggy would make an extreme dive bomb down the inside. It didn't pay off, and he came back out in 5th place. Muriel unfortunately locked his tyres coming into the braking zone of the chicane, so lost out in that big battle for 7th position, and then had to try and catch up to that pack again to try and get the slipstream. Scandigi and Spurgey were still battling on, but Lozzi's Cool slowed down extremely at the chicane, and it meant that Scandigi hit him. Unfortunately for those three, that meant this man caught up massively, and it went into a 4-car battle for the last lap for that 3rd position. And it was then who's going to get this 3rd position, the last place on the podium, and this man with the extra grip on his tyres was one of the favourites to get that. So they would continue to race round, half the lap done, but in the chicane Lozza ran wide, and that meant Spurgey built up a little bit of a gap to those 3 drivers, and this man would then make a move on Scandigi. Did he make the 2 places? No, he didn't. Lozza managed to pull back in, but this man had made 1 position up again. Coming on to the start finish straight, Spurgey had built up enough of a gap, but then it was who was going to come 4th now between Lozza Cool and Nisman. So Nisman would get the slipstream initially, Lozza on the left hand side of the track, Nisman on the right hand side of the track, and it would be Nisman in his GTR getting that 4th position from Lozza Cool. Scandigi would then finish in 6th place. It was then a question further down the field who would get what position, and that was your final results for Heat 1 of this 2-heat race. So the 2nd heat, we did 2 warm-up laps due to an accident, and Tony once again was set to start in the grid results from the 1st heat. MSPJ Town starting in 2nd place, so of course those 2 wanted to break away early. Nisman wanted to make up a few more positions, especially after that stunning drive in the 1st heat, but everybody else also wanted that position, and everyone was fighting through the field to try and get as many positions as they could early on to try and get that early advantage. The big question though was who's going to get what position. This man of course was pushing, managed to get ahead of Lozzi's Cool, and then was on the hunt for Spurgey as they came round this corner. We showed this excellent camera shot of all 15 drivers, all racing, all competing very fairly, competitively, and extremely quickly as well as they came around that, and we got that awesome camera shot. Back to the racing though, and it was MSPJ Town and Tony that started to pull away from the field. Both in Lexus Denso Sards, both excellent drivers, and both wanting to just break away and have their own little battle for that 1st and 2nd place. GM Matthew pitted early, but pitted a bit too early we felt, because Stretchy tried the same and it didn't pay off in the 1st heat. GM Matthew, obviously thinking otherwise, tried to go for it in this 2nd heat. 3rd place battle initially involved 3 cars as they initially broke away, but because they were battling so heavily there, 3 cars wide, it meant that the rest of the drivers did catch up again. Scandigi, Ghost Driver, all wanting that. Scandigi though did pit slightly early, so Scandigi being Scandigi was always one to watch at the end of the race. We thought he was in with his shots, trying to do a little bit of a cutback on the rest of the field. Nisman had an accident, and that would be unfortunate for him because that would mean he would retire. GTP Pasm then pitted a few laps later and actually came out ahead of Scandigi, so that strategy hadn't worked out. GTP Pasm had actually made a very good call. The rest of the drivers of course pitting. Stretchy had made a good move once again, now pitting a bit later, and then we had Spurgey coming out of the pits once again. Was he going to come out ahead of Lozza Cool? He wasn't this time, and him and Lozza would come out ahead of Pasm, who we thought would have made a good strategic call, hadn't in this case, but unfortunate for Lozza Cool and Spurgey, Pasm would catch them with the following drivers of Muriel and Scandigi, so it all worked out sort of in the end for each of those drivers, and we would end up in a massive battle. Question was what's going to happen with the leaders, MSPJ Town and Tony. So MSPJ Town goes into the pits, but Tony hits MSPJ Town. MSPJ Town getting rear damage, but in the pits Tony got engine damage, and that would mean Tony would have a full lap of very decreased horsepower in that car, and it would mean it would cost him that 1st place victory in this race, but it was where he would come out after he did the pit stops. Other drivers pitted at the same time as MSPJ Town. Ghost Driver coming out just ahead of Lozza Cool, but everybody else joining the fray there with a huge battles going on as they exited the pits, and it was all kicking off for that 3rd place position. Now because Tony had that damage, it would now be a second place position, and Tony would come out at the back of that pack, and he would have a lot of work to do for the rest of the race and to try and minimise that damage that he had caused. Hashino was then retired from the race with engine damage, and then it would be a 13-car race. So Tony pushing hard in this pack, managed to get one position, and of course then was pushing onwards to try and overtake the rest of the drivers to try and get up to that second place position, the one that he unfortunately lost in that accident. So GTP PASM initially started to break away, with everybody battling so hard. Everyone was fighting for each and every inch of the track. So PASM was breaking away initially, and we ended up with 3, 4, 5 cars wide at this point on the straight, and with so little laps left, everyone wanted that position, including Tony. So as they came into this first corner, who was going to come out on the exits? In fact, it was Spurgey who would come out ahead of everybody, because everybody ran slightly wide. So Spurgey from 7th to 3rd in one corner. Everyone still fighting, still wanting that extra position that they could get for the slipstream on the last few laps. As we came to the last lap though, indeed the packs had broken up slightly, with everyone fighting so hard. Tony had managed to break away from Spurgey and Ghost Driver after Ghost Driver ran slightly wide on that long right-hander. It was then a question whether Tony could catch PASM. Tony was the fastest driver of both heats really, and it was a question of would he do it. MSP J-Town won, and GTP PASM was being chased very hard by Tony, and Tony had an extra 10 miles an hour in him. Did he catch him though? He didn't, and PASM finished second with Tony in 3rd place. Who would finish 4th? It would be Spurgey who would finish 4th, and Ghost Driver in 5th position. We did have to check that, and Skendiggy finished 6th. Juju was finished in 7th with Muriel in 8th, and then Lozzie is cool in 9th. Stretchy had a good race in that second heat and finished 10th. Andro 11th, Outlaw in 12th, and GM Matthew in 13th. Ashino and Nisman, your retirees. So that's your results for round 5 of this Pure's Japanese Grand Touring Series. An excellent 2 heats, and we'll see you at round 6.